Well, why don't we go ahead and get started? I know people are still logging in, but as usual, we'll start with something fun and engaging. And I'm going to ask everyone to type into the chat box your favorite summer food indulgence. So like hot dog, ice cream, something else you like on the grill. So why don't folks, I see April is on top of that. Go ahead and type into the chat box your favorite summer food while the last few people are joining the call, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Oh, this is great. Fruity drinks. I like the people logging in with multiple answers. You couldn't keep it at just one. Folks just joining, this is Jennifer Rennie. Welcome to the CIP All Call in June, and folks are typing into the chat box their favorite summer indulgence. Okay, we'll give that another minute. We'll wait until that dies down. Might be 15:15 the hour before that dies down.
Jen, some of us aren't able to log on for a variety of reasons.
Log on. Is that Judy?
Judy. Yeah. I'm not able to log on because I'm in a place where I can't log on, so I'm on the phone, but I won't be able to see anything. I'll just be able to hear. So sorry about that.
Got it. No, thank you for telling me, Judy. And we're, as you know, covering today, David is going to talk about an overview of the new program instruction that's coming out, and then Tim Jasko-Fisher is going to give an update on the planning for the CIP annual meeting. So David and Tim and I will be mindful that some folks are not in the Adobe room and are on audio only. And Judy, feel free, if you've got you or anyone else who's on audio only, to unmute your phone and jump in and ask questions.
Thank you.
Yes, and we are wrapping up the fun where people are putting in their creative summer indulgences, and I will send you a copy of the chat screen. It's a lot of good ideas here. So I know folks are still typing. I hear a few more beeps, but why don't we go ahead and get started? So again, welcome to the CIP All Call in June, and I just reviewed what it is that we're going to cover today. So I am going to turn it over to David Kelly, who is going to give you an overview of the anticipated changes in the program instructions. David?
Thanks, Jen. Hi, everybody. I'm going to be even quicker than planned because now I'm starving. Thanks to all your great food suggestions there. Before talking about the PI, I just wanted to address one issue that I know everyone is probably thinking about, and that's the reauthorization status of the CIP. And right now, as many of you know, there is a bill before Congress that has within it a number of important child welfare changes and provisions. Included within those is straight line item reauthorization for the CIP at current funding levels through 2021. So we are hopeful that bill will be passed, and hopeful that it may be passed relatively soon. But that is the most up-to-date information that I have. If there are any questions, feel free to get in touch with me, but I have shared what I know at this point, and I'll continue to keep everybody up to date. Moving on to the anticipated changes in the PI. I would categorize them generally as all moving in the direction of better defining or clarifying the collaboration requirements under the program. Historically, they haven't been very well defined But, really, the main reason why this program exists, where it exists, is to facilitate, encourage, support meaningful work between agencies and courts and tribes. So you'll see a theme throughout many of these changes that we're really trying to push in that direction. I'll start out, as usual, with a couple of somewhat boring, but I hope helpful administrative changes.
David, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm so sorry. May I remind people to mute your line, either the mute key on your phone or *6. Thank you so much. Sorry, David. Back to you.
No worries. Appreciate it. So the first is that we're going to change the requirement from from 2 submissions annually to just 1. So we hope that will save everyone time. We hope that will make for a kind of a better informed, better integrated planning process. So let me distinguish a little bit. So there are the submissions that will be due this year, and then the submissions that will be due in fiscal years, the interim years, 18, 19, 20, 21. So this year, the application that will be due is considered kind of the full application. So that means that you'll need to have the letters of assurance, as you always do, from the court and from the Child Welfare Agency, a budget narrative, a list of your advisory board members or task force members, a 5-year strategic plan, and a self-assessment. So that all of those things will be due every 5 years, once every 5 years. And then in the off years, all that will be due is a self-assessment and any updates that are necessary to your strategic plan. And they'll be due at the same time. This year, because the PI is not yet through the clearance process here, we are shooting for a September 15th application due date. And I'll keep a close eye on that. If the PI is not available as soon as we'd like it to be, we have the option to push that application due date back a little bit further. Beginning next year, your self-assessment and then any corresponding changes to the strategic plan that you may identify through the self-assessment process will be due on June 30th. The reason for moving the annual submission to June 30th is very intentional. That is the same deadline for the State Child Welfare Agency's submission of their APSRs, their annual program update reports. And we're having them due at the same time because we want you to meet and we want you to jointly plan. And we want to make sure that where there are important areas that you're both addressing, that that's done strategically. And we also want to create and support the creation of as many opportunities to work together meaningfully as possible. So we're looking for more integration there. Let me pause momentarily. I've basically made it through the first 3 items on the one-page document that's up on the screen. For those that are not looking at the screen, there are only 5 items, and I'll go through those. But any questions at this point? Okay. Item 4 on the list is specific to your statewide multidisciplinary task forces, both the composition of those task forces and the frequency with which they meet. And what we want to do is make sure that these task force meetings are meaningful, collaborative opportunities, and that all the right players are there to participate in discussion about how CIPs can be more involved in all of the child welfare program planning and improvement efforts in the state. So in the past we may have kind of perhaps focused too much on the CFSR to the exclusion of earlier and more meaningful planning opportunities. We want to make sure that CIPs are meaningfully involved in the full spectrum of child welfare program planning and improvement efforts. So CFSR, just one of many opportunities. And we want to make sure that that CIPs are meeting regularly with key decision makers and key folks at the Child Welfare Agency that have authority and influence over important agency functions and processes. So that's all to say, with this PI, we are strongly encouraging each task force to convene at least quarterly. And in your application, if you are unable to commit to quarterly meetings, you'll be asked to provide an especially strong rationale.
David, this is David Tang from New Jersey. I have a quick question.
Okay. Good time. What I was going to say, though, is not have
David, this is Jen. I think we're having trouble with your audio, with your connection. You're breaking up.
Okay, not sure what to do about that.
Oh, there you go. There you go. You're back on loud and clear. Sorry.
So where do I need to return to? What was heard and what was fuzzy? There was a question kind of in the middle of something I was saying.
Mm-hmm. Why don't David Tang, if you would ask your question again, and then David, start your response to David Tang's question from the top.
Okay, so my question relates to the task force, and it's actually two parts. One is each of these people that are listed on that first slide, do they have to be separate, or could the same person? Can one person wear multiple hats?
It all depends on your agency structure. So what we want to make sure is that there's meaningful attendance, so that there's someone there that can speak to all of these issues and has decision-making ability and influence over all of those issues. So it could be that in some states, the CFSR lead and the QA lead are the same person. So that's fine. It could be that 3 or 4 people instead of 8 cover all those topics adequately. But you'll need to explain that in your application about who's on the task force and why, and which of those areas.
Identify those people. And my second question is, the last item there is tribal child or ICWA specialist. So New Jersey doesn't have any federally recognized tribes within its borders.
But you do have Indian children in New Jersey. So whoever it would be but you do have Indian children in New Jersey. So it'd be whoever from the agency, it makes the most sense to talk about practice with respect to children.
Okay. Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit there too, but I did hear most of that. Okay, thank you. I'm going back on mute.
David, this is Judy Nord.
Hi, Judy.
Hi. I'm at a location where I'm not able to see the screen. I don't have internet access, so I'm not sure what you're showing. It sounds like it's a list of people who need to be on the statewide advisory committee. Is that information going to be in the program instruction for those who can't see it right now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And Judy, this is Jen. What I'm going to do is leave the room open, so you can just click on the link that was sent out over the listserv, and the document that David is referring to with the 5 points, and they really are quite brief, will be available for download in the room. And for everybody else, in the lower right-hand corner, the information contained in the PowerPoint is in a PDF document under anticipated CIP program instruction changes. David, there are questions in the chat box. Do you want to take those questions in the chat box now, or do you want to continue and take them at the end?
Let me look at the chat box. My screensaver is on.
You scroll to the bottom. There's one from Bridget, Angela, and Kate. Just let me know if you want me to read them.
Okay. Yeah, why don't you read them, Jen?
Sure. So the first one's from Bridget. Can the subcommittee meetings of the task force count towards the quarterly meetings?
That all depends on who's involved with them and what their purpose is. So you'll basically have to explain your process in your application.
Okay. And then from Angela Reed Brown, what is the name of the federal bill that is pending before Congress that would reauthorize CIP?
It's the Families First Act. That's
okay.
The abbreviated title.
Terrific. And perhaps some of the CBCC staff that's on the call can type some of this information in the chat box so folks have it in writing. And then Kate Shuffeld, is the strategic plan update due on September 15th as well as a new plan?
A new 5-year plan is due on September 15th. And that can be, the CIP strategic plans are living documents. So you're saying this is what we plan to do for the next 5 years. So clearly that can build on stuff you're already doing. So I think it's easier to think of it as a new 5-year plan.
Okay, thanks. And then Debbie Alsacker-Burke, do the changes in the CIP steering committee start in fiscal year 2017 or 2018?
17.
Okay. And then Christine Kiesel, is there anticipated to be a new strategic plan form, or will it be the same?
It's essentially the same. There was a subcommittee or work group of CIPs that volunteered to give advice on how to tune it up, slim it down, make it a more useful tool, and we made all of those changes. So it will look similar, but hopefully be more concise and less unwieldy.
Great, thanks. And then thanks to Christina Cooper for giving the official name of the bill. I see folks are still typing, so why don't we let folks continue to type questions and move on. David, did you want me to move to bullet number 5, or was there anything else you wanted to say about bullet number 4 that's on the screen?
I think we can move on. I mean, the takeaway from 4 is that the Children's Bureau feels it's very important that the agency be well represented and that the folks that are a part of the task force have, true ability to make decisions, influence agency commitments and involvement. So it's your charge to think through who the right people are. These are the folks or the roles that we feel are most important. We know that may look different in every state, but in your application, we'll be looking for you to clearly lay out who will be there and why.
Great, thanks.
So, number 5, and these are really the two most significant changes. They're both connected to the data grant, but they really do, I think, cross-cut the entire program. So 5 years ago, we required that there were the 5 timeliness measures that every CIP needed to report on, and the Center for Courts did a really nice job analyzing all that was submitted. There was some good progress made. There were a lot of challenges. Some CIPs found the measures very helpful and wove them into certain projects and activities. Others, candidly, and I appreciated that, said, well, we just saw it as a reporting requirement. You know, we did our best to collect these things. We didn't really use them, but we sent them into you. The intention all along was really to promote data use. It was to kind of prompt CIPs to do what they needed to do to make sure that hearings and reviews were happening timely, et cetera. But to be very frank, CIP dollars are quite limited, and it's unrealistic to think that state or courts rather that do not have statewide automated systems, the money you receive through the data grant is not adequate to create such systems. So after a lot of discussion with many of you, we're going to try a different approach. And so the new approach will be that all CIPs are required to create a plan that will allow you to continuously monitor and improve both the timeliness and quality of dependency court hearings. And it's up to you to propose how best to do this in your state with your resources. Those of you that do use the toolkit measures in meaningful ways, we really, really encourage you to continue to do that. Those of you that have alternative ideas, let's explore them. And those of you that already have a system that you feel adequately does this, that's what you describe in your application. But the idea is that you create what will be most useful to you, and the Center for Courts will be there to help you think that through. And we hope that this will move away from that idea of reporting things just to report, and instead lead to action that is meaningful and helpful to you. Any questions on A before I get to B? Because B is also although they're both A on the PowerPoint slide, is also a fairly important change.
This is Hope from Maryland. So, is the monitoring irregardless of whether or not you apply for the data grant or not? Is it just CIPs across the board and not necessarily tied to one of the grants?
Well, it will be tied to the data grant, but I would argue that it's a core function of the program, but right now it's tied to the data grant.
Thank you.
David, thanks, Hope, for the question. There are a few questions in the chat box. I'm going to take them somewhat out of order and cluster them. So Katie Gregory is asking, are there any reporting requirements or updates due let me just read the way she wrote it. Sorry. Do we have any
Nothing
reporting
is due
requirements?
August 30th.
Okay. Or should all information be submitted together on September 15th, budget, strategic plans, et cetera?
All information together September 15th. So nothing repetitive.
Great. And then the other questions, I'm sorry, I didn't realize.
Yeah, I was just reading the questions. I'm sorry. Yeah, I see the question from Bridget. Will the self-assessment format change at all? If it has changed, could we get a copy of that as well? Only slightly. It's essentially the same thing that you've used last year. That instrument, as well as the changed strategic plan, which is essentially the same, are at OMB for official approval right now, and will be included as attachments to the PI when it comes out. But neither are different enough that neither are different enough from what was used last year that really prevent you from thinking and moving forward.
Great, thanks. I think that wraps up the questions so far in the chat box. So please continue to type your questions, and then David, if you want to move on to 5B.
Sure. Yeah, I'll go there now.
Or A2.
No problem.
David, before you move on, I'm sorry, before you move on, just one question on something that Bridget just said, which just jogged something in my mind. So this is Judy from Minnesota. You had mentioned that for this fiscal year, because it's the start of our new 5-year strategic plan, the letter of support, our new strategic plan, the self-assessment would all be due this year. And maybe I misunderstood the timing of that. Will that all be due in September as opposed to the last few years where our grant application was due at one point, which was usually around August, and then the self-assessment was due later? Are you saying all of that, including the self-assessment, would now be due in September as one package?
Yes. We have one package due September 15th.
Okay. Thank you for clarification.
And then it will change to one package June 30th for the 4 years that follow.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. So this is, in my view, both the largest change and most exciting change, also connected to the data grant. So all CIPs will be required to jointly design and implement one project with the Child Welfare Agency that uses child welfare data to improve a specific permanency outcome or outcomes for children and families. So what we're requiring is that either through the task force or a smaller work group of the task force, or high-level meetings with the Child Welfare Agency, that the CIP and Child Welfare Agency look at available data together around permanency, and based on what you see, you identify something that you're going to target together, and that you develop a project that will be incorporated into your strategic plan that's truly jointly designed, implemented, and monitored. So those are the key requirements of the data grant. But I also think that those really both get to the heart of what the court improvement program was intended to do. So questions, discussion, comments, all welcome.
David, this is Mary Fuller.
Hi, Mary.
Hi. The report to wrap up this previous plan will be due August 30th. Is that what's being done away with? Or will we have a wrap up to the last 5-year strategic plan August the 30th and then a new plan September the 15th?
So nothing is due August 30th.
Okay.
And September 15th is when the new application is due. One of the components of the new application is a self-assessment, and that self-assessment will look back on the work that you did between December and September, and speak a little bit, to areas you plan to focus on. And then that self-assessment that process of thinking back on what you intended to do, whether you accomplished it, what worked, what didn't, is designed to help you think about your new strategic plan. So, if you're thinking about what you're submitting as kind of a wrap-up or summary or assessment, it's the self-assessment. And I realize you did one in December, but this is an opportunity to look at the time in between there and program status overall. So that'll be one of the components that's due September 15th.
Thank you.
Sure.
David, there are a number of substantive questions about 5B in the chat box, starting with Christine's. Seemed to be easier when you were reading the questions. Do you want to take those one by one?
Sure. Thanks, Jen. And thanks for reading them earlier. I had a blacked out screen. Christine's question, does it have to be a brand new project, or if one that fits this category was recently undertaken and will span over time, is this acceptable? It does not have to be a brand new project. So if you have been working on something that you think meets that requirement, articulate that in your application. We'll want to know the specific permanency outcomes you're working on and the specific measures you'll be using to do that. But if you have something ongoing or you have a strong foundation to build something on, by all means, please do so. Kelly's question also about 5B is this limited to permanency outcomes, reunification, adoption, et cetera, or can it be a joint initiative to focus more on well-being, parenting time, things like that? And we specifically want a connection to permanency here. So I think that it's possible to think creatively about what impacts permanency, but we do want to uniformly have all CIPs working with the agency on something permanency related. So I think that of the examples Kelly listed in her question, parenting or visitation related project, I think that it'd be possible to create, a theory of change around visitation and parenting and parenting time and how that may affect permanency. So, you can be creative in how you approach that, but it has to be something that both the CIP and the agency are equally committed to. Moving down to Kathy's question, is there a deadline to complete the joint project? The application has to lay out what the joint project is, that you've identified. This is the area that you want to work on, that, here is the theory of change, here is what you hope to accomplish, measures, et cetera. But we expect that it'll take, this is a project that could run years potentially. So if by complete the project means accomplish your goals, no, but your plan should project, when you hope to achieve certain milestones and outcomes. Crystal has a question about the assurances that are required. Very little change, maybe just slightly more precise language. There will be an emphasis on data sharing in both letters. There was a data sharing requirement on the agency side that they will share all relevant and useful child welfare data for purposes of joint program planning and improvement efforts. There'll be a similar requirement on the CIP side, the court side, that you will proactively share all relevant, data and learning generated from your projects with the Child Welfare Agency for purposes of joint program planning and improvement. You're welcome, Kelly. The Illinois CIP asks, does the application allow for a planning process, or does the project need to be determined prior to September 15th deadline? Part of the reason of pushing the deadline back into September is to provide some time to begin discussions. So, we want to see as well-formed a plan as possible, but I think it's reasonable to include plans to plan more in your submission. So you should have something identified and fairly well thought through or developed, but we understand that additional planning may be required. Likely will be required. So just articulate that in your submission. And to answer Grace's question, the CIP program instruction is in the kind of clearance and approval process at the Children's Bureau, so it's not yet available. But the purpose of this call was to talk about all of the changes that we anticipate, so that there are no surprises, and so that you can begin thinking about how to prepare for these. So there's nothing in addition to what's been presented today, and the forms are nearly identical, so there should be no surprises there either.
Sorry, David, one more question from Leola came in about whether or not the new requirements have been communicated to the Child Welfare Agency.
Well, the PI will be the way those are communicated initially, and then the regional offices will be communicating directly with the Child Welfare Agencies to reinforce all of that. But nothing has been communicated prior to the release of the PI. That's the notice to the field.
Great, thank you. Another question from Jenny has just come in.
Yes, absolutely. So Jenny is asking, can CIP/court data be used as part of these projects in addition to or along with child welfare data? And yes, absolutely. We want you to, the thrust behind this is to encourage use of already existing data. And in a high percentage of jurisdictions, there's more agency data than there is court data. But to the extent it makes sense to blend these things, please do.
Sorry about the dial tone. I think it probably...
The number you've dialed is not in service. Please check the number and dial again or call 777-7000 for operator assistance.
I apologize to the folks on the phone. Okay. So that's the last question in the chat box, and I don't see that anyone else is typing. So why don't we pause and see whether or not anyone either has a question they can type into the chat box or or another question for David over the phone.
David, what about the annual fiscal reporting that normally takes place in December? Will that be the same?
Yes, thank you. That's an important question. Yeah, the annual fiscal reporting will remain exactly the same. That's handled through a different office than mine. So that'll continue to be due in December as it always has been.
Angela's asking about the data report.
There is no data report. So the data requirements are what we talked about with item number 5 from the list, that you will design these plans or these projects and include them in your strategic plan.
So, David, this is Bridget. Just to clarify, we no longer have to report on the 5 timeliness measures?
That's correct.
Okay. Thanks.
You can include, if you're using them, if you're capturing data, there's a place to talk about what you're capturing, how you're using it in the self-assessment. But there's no longer a requirement that you capture and report those 5 measures.
Even for the 2016 self-assessment, or is it still required under the 2016 self-assessment?
Required under the 2016 self-assessment, but with the new program instruction, it will no longer be required.
Okay, that helps. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see that anyone's typing, and we'll pause one more moment to see whether anyone would like to ask a question over the phone.
So just
Terrific.
a final comment is,
please.
Please feel free to shoot me emails or give me a ring individually if I've said anything confusing or you have additional questions. All of these changes were informed by you in conversations that we've had and feedback we've received. So that the idea is to make the application and reporting processes as streamlined and meaningful as possible, so no one feels they're reporting just to report, that these are tools that you use, not busy work. And the other goal or ambition here is to increase CIP footholds to become more integrated into work with the agency. And there will be corresponding support coming through my colleagues at the regional office and other programs to continue to push and encourage the Child Welfare Agency to be to exercise reciprocal collaboration. So that's what's underlying this.
And David, if I may, on behalf of the CIP community, really express our gratitude for all the work that you've done behind the scenes, in front of the scenes, on stage, off stage, everything that you've done to have that come about. And it's really been extraordinary, and I know that my colleagues share in my thanks to you for this. This is really a terrific development, very exciting, so thank you.
Well, thank you, and thanks everyone for all the good work that you do. All right,
wonderful.
I've spoken enough.
Okay, thank you. I'm now going to turn this over to Tim Jasko-Fisher, who is going to talk about what to expect at the CIP annual meeting. And then again, in the lower right-hand corner, you will see a PDF of the draft agenda that you can download. Tim.
Yes, thanks, and sorry for making everyone's screen float around earlier. Oh, there's an error connecting to the file. The CIP meeting agenda as it currently stands right now is down in the file box if folks want to take a look at that. It's roughly the same as the one that was sent out earlier. And I'm just going to kind of talk through it real quick because we've got about 10 minutes or so here and let people know what to expect. If you have questions, you're welcome to type them in the chat or contact me or your liaison to let you know. The meeting will be August 29th and 30th. We'll start at 8:30 in the morning on the 29th, and we'll spend about an hour and a half looking at the first section we're calling Anatomy of an Evidence-Informed Intervention. And what we really want to do is be able to help people understand just kind of what do we mean by managing change. The Capacity Building Collaborative has been working for well over a year now on developing a change management model to help you. Many of you who've done CQI consults or who've been working closely with your liaisons on projects have already seen that and know what that looks like. In fact, I think most folks likely have seen it at least once. And what we're hoping to do there is just to spend a very short period of time to help people get clear on what that model looks like, and then to give you an opportunity to help actually do some of the things that David was discussing in terms of coming up with project, right? So what does that look like? How do you develop a question that you actually can measure? And part of that conversation will be being able to practice at your tables with your fellow state attendees to kind of look at what that might look like and maybe actually get some real work done that you can take back home and use. And part of the idea for that will also be thinking through what are different kinds of data that you may have accessible to you and how would you be able to identify that data. So we've talked a little bit about administrative data and things that might be available from the agency. But what if that kind of data isn't available specifically on what you're working on? Or what if you want something to supplement that data? What might that look like? Where might you get it? So that will be kind of the first chunk of the morning on the first day. We'll take a short break. And then what we'll talk about is really get specific about administrative data after a short break. We're thinking about running either a case study or asking you to bring specific problems so that you can think about administrative data in your state. And also have a conversation and perhaps ask people to share examples and maybe even stories of examples about things like memoranda of understanding. How do you identify data that might not be right at your fingertips but that you could have access for? How would you share that? That issue comes up across the country all the time, and there are many people who've done it successfully. There are also many people who are still struggling in various ways to get that done. So from 10:15 to noon on day one, we'll really be focusing on that, both sharing information about how to do that and also giving you some ideas to think about how you might take that information back to your own state. We'll then have lunch, and then we'll do about a 2-hour block from 1 to 3, where what we'll really be encouraging people to do is, first of all, listen to kind of a quick primer on how the federal efforts like the CFSR, the CFSP, how those kinds of processes lay out over time for your agency, and identifying places where courts and CIPs might both benefit and contribute to those processes over time. So the idea would be to be able to understand how the federal process works, and then also to be able to hear some examples of how CIPs across the country have used those processes to drive court improvement and also to help the agency achieve their goals. There'll then be time during that block for individual state work, for people to think about how to develop a strategy for engaging in these efforts or improving your engagement in those efforts when you go back home. There'll be a short break, and then we'll wind down the day with an opportunity for everyone to hear and have a showcase of some of the efforts that the Capacity Building Center for Courts has been developing over the last year, kind of under our new model here. And that could include things like talking about the constituency groups that are up and running so that people understand what those are and how they might get involved. We have some universal products that people might be interested in. Will also be kind of mid-development on a suite of online learning experiences that we can share with people. And you might also get to see some of the more direct, on-the-ground kind of technical assistance projects that are being undertaken by the center. And then we'll wrap up that first day with the Mark Hardin Award. So that gives you an idea of what day one looks like. Day two will start the first 2 hours from 8:30 to 10:30 will be a CIP directors meeting. That meeting will be only for CIP directors. So what we're asking is, I know in the past occasionally people have wanted to bring others to that meeting. We're asking for this meeting that it only be you as the CIP director. While that's going on, what we hope to do for a couple of hours in another room for folks that are not CIP directors is have kind of a mini film festival screening. And what we're hoping to do there is to get a variety of short films, maybe up to 20 minutes, where people are using these films to spread the word about CIP, to spread the word about your initiatives. Maybe you use them as training films or opportunities to learn. And we want to curate a collection of those and then run them at the meetings so that people who are not CIP directors can watch those. Those of you who are CIP directors, one of the products that will come out of that, out of preparing for that, will be a resource that lists all of the films and where you can watch them, and a brief couple of sentences about what they're about. So I know it's difficult to want to be with your team while things are going on. I know, we had the group that helped put this agenda together, and thank you. Many of you are on the line. There were a number of CIP directors, liaisons, and others from the CBCC that helped put this together. I know it was a big struggle to think about, well, how do we have discrete time for directors to have a meeting and let everyone be together as much as possible too. So this was the resolution we came to have an optional film screening for those that weren't in the CIP directors meeting. That way you can see those films later and be able to have conversations about them with your group if you need to. So we'll have a short break from 10:45 to noon. We'll work on collecting data that you don't already have. So what are simple, concrete ways that you can gather data for a project? What might it look like to develop a data plan for a project? It's my hope that what we'll be able to do is show you some examples of what that looks like, and then also give you an opportunity to work in your state. If you have a project that you're working on, it would be a great time to bring that project to the table to start working with folks on. If you don't have a project, we'll develop a hypothetical project that you can work on so that you can kind of apply all of the things that you've been learning up until this point. We'll take a lunch break. We'll have an interview with, right after lunch, an interview with the CB director. And then we will round out our day that day with having some conversations about how to tell a story with your data. So how do you take this data and put it into a compelling narrative to get people engaged and involved, or to let them know what you've done? And then we'll finish off the day with talking about CIPs making a difference. So we're going to be kind of asking for folks to begin to prepare maybe short 10 or 15 minutes.
Tim? This is Jen. Concerned that we lost Tim. I will send him a note and trust that he'll log back in. So we're 5 minutes until completion. So what I'm going to ask folks to do is, if you've got questions about the CIP meeting or comments or feedback, please type that into the chat box. We will memorialize the chat box, and Tim will get that information. So I'll pause and give folks an opportunity to type into the chat box. And then if people want to, there are a number of folks from the CBCC team that are on the call that have been participating in the planning of the annual meeting. And I also want to acknowledge the group of folks, the CIP directors themselves, who have participated in a number of Adobe Connect events to plan the annual meeting. Yes, Allison, lunch will be on your own. Stephanie, I do not know the answer to that question about the last session on September 2nd, but I'm so grateful that you asked that question because it gives me an opportunity to point out that the CIP meeting is the 29th and 30th, which are the first 2 days of that week, and that the NCAN conference starts. Actually, I believe they're going to have a film the evening of the 30th, and then the morning of the 31st is the NCAN conference. So we strongly, strongly encourage you to stay for the NCAN conference. And again, Stephanie, I do not know when that ends on Friday.
It looks like
Angela,
Nikki was just kind enough to post a link that may have the schedule.
Thanks.
But there will be a number of workshops, sessions, opportunities that will be and have intentionally been designed for CIP and court community folks. So I will, once all of that is kind of summarized for me, I will put out a listserv post that lets you know what's available that may be of particular interest.
Great, thanks. Angela, we don't have funding to provide food and drink for a reception, so that will be informally and on your own. But folks will be there. It's a great location. Looking through. Okay, great. So in the final 2 minutes, if as folks are signing off again, I'm going to leave the room open and we will memorialize the chat discussion. And then, as usual, at the conclusion of our CIP all calls, if you could, on a scale of 1 to 10, just type into the chat box as you're signing off the usefulness of today's session. That's helpful for us. Thank you so much. Thanks, Angela, for the 20. I don't know how the evaluators counted 20, but I'll consider it a 10. Thank you. Thanks, everyone, and thanks again to David and to Tim.